Welcome to Money on Tap. Money on Tap, your personal finance headquarters, where we bring out the professionals' experience and some fun in what we call three-dimensional investing, utilizing insurance, brokerage, and fee-based planning. That's what we do on this show. We look at all sides of the issues, and we bring a fully independent planning perspective to the table.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. Welcome aboard. It is good to have you here with us at Money on Tap. My name is Seth Krussman, joined with Ben Brayshaw and Dan Mickelin. How are you guys doing today?
I'm doing great, Seth. Happy to be at the end of tax season and hitting spring, but just at the right time, it feels like.
Just when I thought I was done talking about taxes. No, I'm doing good. Every time I do have a relief after tax season, I have that kind of like, the weight has been lifted. I mean, I think that's just mostly from our business side, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we're constantly answering phones and working with clients and talking to them about this and getting them that form and working with their CPA and making sure things are detailed and connected. There's a lot of pieces moving during tax season, and you'd think we were a CPA firm with all the communication we do, but I'm doing good, to summarize that.
Yeah, there's the light at the end of the tunnel, right? And once you kind of cross that line, there is definitely a sense of relief. I'm sure people that pay taxes out there get that too, right? Once that signature is done, money's out the door. It's like, oh, thank goodness. And most of us would love to be able to go ahead and say that's a wrap. And I'm not even going to think about any of that stuff until, next January 1 or whatever your time is that you start doing taxes, thinking about taxes. Others of us say, wow, what a learning experience I've had this season. And wouldn't it be great if I carried that information into this next year and just crushed it, absolutely capitalized on the opportunities that I have to save money? If that's you, or even if you kind of got that brewing on the back burner over there and you're just like, I don't know, maybe that's an idea I'm working through. Either way, this is a great show for you. We're going to be talking about let's lower your taxes. I don't come across the person very often that says, I'm perfectly fine paying the taxes I pay right now. Just, you know what? I think that whatever the ideology might be behind that, I think the government's doing a beautiful job of what they do. I don't want to, take away from what they're doing. If you have some of those sensitivities, I could understand it as well. But for myself, I really prefer to be able to have decision-making power over how I use my dollars and where those go and how those are spent. And there's nothing wrong with that either. Both, if either way, we're going to get into some stuff here for you it's going to empower you to choose which path you want to go down, right? And that's what I'm looking forward to today.
Well, let's get us going there, Seth.
Is that all right? Man, I thought you guys had like a ton of stuff that you were working through over there. It was deep a minute ago in here. Well, that's it, folks. We're going to get to it. But before we do, it's time for Money in the News.
And up first, coming to us from Reuters, courtesy of the New York Post, new home sales surged in March on a 171% jump in the Northeast, which is where we're located, and all of our radio listeners are. Certainly, podcast listeners are coast to coast and all over the world, for that fact. But here in the Northeast, the real estate market, seems to have kind of had its ebbs and flows lately, but has very, very quickly rebounded to being as hot as it was before we went through all this kind of rate explosion. So it seems to have been, some short-term let-up. But as soon as the mortgage rate I'm speaking to dips even the slightest little bit, the market seems to just gravitate right towards that and sales jump once again.
Rates hitting 7.3% late 22. That has an effect on people for sure. When they start seeing the house that they've had their eyes on, go up a couple $100, not a big deal. But when you're talking about maybe $1,000 or more in terms of the interest that you'd be paying on that house, it can slow your roll a little bit. And I used to be, this is going back to past life, what did I do before doing this? I used to be a mortgage planner. And when I was doing mortgages, that was like a great rate. And I remember that very well. Like, this was the common rate that was happening. And guess what? You know, it wound up actually falling off a cliff there because this is pre-2007. But that was kind of where the market was at before we started to see that slide. So I think we're at a normal inflection point where the inflation's going to slow down. I think we're going to see these mortgage rates start to come down. And I think we're just in a season where people are ready. You know, they've been looking at it and they've done maybe a little extra savings on the side to bring down the total of what that mortgage would be on that house. And there's a lot of new inventory out there in the housing market as well.
You know, I look at this article and it really speaks to a lot I've seen in the real estate market, specifically in the Northeast. I mean, it says here that sales soared 170.8% in the Northeast on a year-over-year basis. But on a year-over-year basis nationwide, sales dropped 3.4%. And I think, you know, Dan, you know, the Northeast, the real estate market is just absolutely out of control, especially New Hampshire. I mean, New Hampshire, it's just, I mean, I think our house doubled in the last year. I mean, in value. It's just, it's very, very kind of surreal at what's going on in the real estate market. And I'm in tune with a lot of real estate brokers and, you know, we have clients in that space, and it's like it is really very complicated in the real estate space. That being said, I think that's, you know, also in the Southeast, you know, has also seen a lot of that too. So I don't know what it's like over there, over your way, Seth. What are you experiencing there personally? What are you seeing?
Yeah, no, there has been a slowdown for sure. But we have seen a lot of building continuing to happen, a lot of new homes still coming to the market. And it's interesting. There's definitely a tale of two cities. You know, one of our friends is just a phenomenal residential real estate agent, and she's had 2 closings since January, and that's the least amount of closings that she has experienced since she got started 25 years ago in real estate. Another friend of ours, he's had more closings in 2023 than he's, you know, for the start of 2023 than he's ever experienced in his career. And it's been a relatively short real estate career of 5-6 years now. So it depends. I guess that's my answer. It really depends. But overall, I think I'm optimistic is what I see.
You know, one of the other things here in the article is, you know, it does kind of break down geographically what's been happening. You know, Northeast has experienced the highest spike at almost 171%. You know, the West is up 29.8% and gained 6% in the Midwest. So, although to Ben's point, overall sales will drop 3.4% nationwide. So clearly there's a regional impact. But when you take the whole country into account, well, I thought one thing that was interesting is that the median home price is now $449,800, which is up 3.2% from a year ago. So even with rates climbing and sales lagging just a little bit nationally, the average home price has gone up.
Lower than inflation.
True that. Very true.
You know, I think that's one thing about real estate, right? You know, someone can afford, if it's $2,000 a month, that's what you can afford, whether that's your interest or your principal. And as rates go up, that interest eats into that $2,000 per month, and it forces the amount of principal you can afford down, and therefore that forces the ultimate value of what you can purchase down. So it's kind of interesting that it still had an increase in the price of homes, considering we've had this, you know, historic largest rate increase in time span in history right in our nose. And as you said, Seth, right, it used to be 7% was like a decent rate. I remember 20 some odd years ago, 25 years, whatever it was, that I bought my first house and saying to myself, I got a first time home buyer rate of like 6.5%. And I was like, holy smokes, like we hit it at the perfect time. And it's like all the things aligned. And I was like, so anyways, it's kind of funny when you start thinking about that. But
so if you didn't know, the new 9 to 5 starts at 6 p.m. for many Gen Zers and millennials, and they'll walk out on employers who don't accommodate their schedule. Well, I love reading that with a little bit of enthusiasm for you guys. Clearly, my experience has been a little bit affected lately over some of those conversations. But thank you, Oriana Rosa Royal, Yahoo Finance, for bringing us this wonderful statistic here of who's doing what out there in the employment world. And I really did enjoy the article from a standpoint of just understanding, who's at different places in their lives. And right now, if you're young, guess what? Your peak period of performance may very well be after 6 p.m. to 3 a.m. If you're an old dude like me, it ain't happening that way. And there's very few of us in our generation that shows up looking for the job of 6 p.m. to 3 a.m. Just my take. And as a matter of fact, even though I do wind up burning the midnight oil from time to time doing what we do, it would be impossible for us to go ahead and say that's what we're going to do today is start opening the doors of Brayshaw Financial Group at 6 p.m.
It's incredible how much of this, just variance in what the workday looks like and the work experience is for people that's come about since this whole COVID thing. I mean, the remote work, the work from home, the off hours. I mean, just growing up, 9 to 5, right? What a way to make a living. I mean, that's what you expected to do was, rise in the morning.
That's why they named a show after it.
That's exactly right. And we were all drawn into this, just trudging along in our day. And now we've gone through this kind of earth-changing event, and everyone's attitudes is, well, I'll work when I want, where I want, for as long as I want. And employers are in a position where they have to accept it. I mean, the only thing good I've heard come out of this is the move towards the 4-day work week, which I'm 100% behind all day long. But this off hours thing is just, maybe it's just that it doesn't fit my the biology of how I exist. That just would not be a good outcome. But having that become the staple set of hours or just this built-in flexibility, it's crazy.
I mean, we're speaking Gen Xer here, buddy. I mean, hey, I'd love to move to a 4-day work week. You sound like a Gen Xer, right? Goodness gracious. Well, let the stock market know that you're all in.
Well, that's true. We're waiting for them to catch up here.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think there's a lot to be said here. And the reason I really like this article, and I thought this is really important to understand, is that when you look at companies and how they're making their money and how they're doing all of this stuff, it's you're looking at like Tim Cook and he's Apple and all the different people that they talk about here. I mean, how are they inventing how they run their businesses to meet the productivity, right? It's not about, for them, they could care less about when the person does their work. They just want them doing it at the most productive times. Right. But then you need people who answer phones between, 9 and 5, Dan, 5 days a week, because that's what people expect. Right. I mean, we have a weekend for a reason. So but it's been an interesting conversation for us and our business, because we do have people who work kind of alternating schedules because we work East and West Coast. So we have this sliding scale of people working a little bit here. And so that adds a little complexity. And so it works into some people's schedules versus others. But people want phones answered, and it's complicated. I really find it's just very different in the world that, like, when you walk into Target, you can't say, well, that person doesn't want to work till 6 p.m. Well, I'm here to buy something at 9 a.m. So there's definitely two different roles here, with society and when they want to buy it, and society and when they want to work, right? And that's complicated.
Well, I'm sure there's some others out there that would probably like to weigh in on, and fathers too, that would like to weigh in on what those job requirements and job hours look like to raise a family. But guess what? We love it. We welcome it. And if that's you, give us a call at Money on Tap and let us know where you're at. Hey, speaking of where you're at, there are some people out there, quite a few of them, as a matter of fact, that are the happiest people in America. And we didn't call them, but you know what? Thank you, Aaron Zitner, Wall Street Journal, that did a little bit of research here on an NORC poll that went ahead and reached out to them to find out, why are you so darn happy? And we get to bring that to you today.
Yeah, I found this to be interesting, from a couple of different perspectives, really. But, when you think of kind of where we're at as a country and, what everyone experiences just watching or reading the news and kind of going about life, the one thing that I thought was probably realistic and makes sense is that the number of very happy people is at its lowest point since 1972, right? So, and that's taken into account all things, right? their economy, their sense of being in community, and whether they're religiously affiliated or not. So all these factors kind of pouring in. But when you just step back and look at the state of the world we're in, you'd expect to see that number probably lagging, from where it's been in the past for sure.
I think the idea that, I mean, this is a great point to this article. I mean, the majority of people who were polled happy had religion in their life. I mean, they were God-fearing people. I mean, I thought was interesting because I think when you actually add, that component to your life, it sets a standard, it sets a reality. I mean, the world has led us with this ongoing onslaught of, nothing is enough. Nothing is enough. I'm working for something. I think about that ING commercial. I think about that all the time. I think about how classic that is of typical bad communication, of sitting on a park bench and seeing that number rising and what's your number? What's your number? And that, how much money do you have? What is enough? And it never quantifies what is enough. And I think the one reason here that I really like is that religion played pretty heavily in the idea of who is extremely happy or very happy in that, because you're not focusing on money, you're focusing on a higher power per se.
Yeah, the common traits of the very happy, here for the article, and it breaks down further by gender and age and political affiliation, all that. But the most common traits were a sense of community, strong relationships, not necessarily marriage, but relationships with friends and family. The belonging to a religious group that you just mentioned there, Ben, and then fitness, personal fitness, being active and feeling physically healthy. Those were the common denominators amongst that happiest group. Percentage-wise, they happen to also be 60 years old or over, female, and the political breakdown was kind of right down the middle.
Well, actually, it said the very happy were mostly Democrats. I don't know. I thought that was interesting, Dan. It was close, but it was saying Democrats.
That might have to be with just who's in office at the moment. So
I think this is now a conspiracy
another
theory.
couple years.
I'm throwing this out.
Funded by NPR.
No, but it was funny. I mean, it just like looking at all these different pieces of that. I mean, it was basically down the middle. I mean, but
I took the 17% of I don't know and kind of threw that in because it was within our margins of error there.
Yeah, no, I know. But it is interesting that, women polled significantly different, 2/3 more very happy than men.
One of the things they tied that back into was the life expectancy. And so I just said, hey, if you're living longer, you're happier. You got less to worry about and less to figure out in a shorter period of time.
I mean, that's definitely one perspective, but I think it really, I know my wife would be in the poll of very happy, and I think it just really has to do with the quality of her husband. I just breaking it down for the facts that why you'd be so happy.
It's a new twist on happy life, happy wife, or whatever.
Hey, that was some really good money in the news and fun to hang out there with you guys for a little bit. You guys, we are talking about let's lower your taxes. That's some more happy news to come. Some of the happiest people in life that I know do what we're about to talk about because they have figured out the code that we're about to bring to you here at Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. You know what? One last thing before we jump off the mic here. If you are joining us via podcast, we want to thank you. We want to appreciate you for subscribing and liking Money on Tap. We're out there everywhere in the podcast world. So if you're on the radio right now, take a minute. Go find us in the podcast. Download, subscribe, and elevate the room. Bring a deeper meaning and understanding to your conversation around money. And that's part of what we're doing here at Money on Tap. And we appreciate you. And because you're doing that, send us a message at info@yourmoneyontap or just reach out and give us a call at 855-226-8551. Let us know that you are a new subscriber to Money on Tap. And we have something that we'd like to send you as a thank you. So thank you for being here with us at Money on Tap. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Ben, how often do we have somebody come into the office and they don't have a financial plan? And how critical is it for us to put the pieces together and make sure that their future, their retirement, is a successful experience? We talk about it all the time here at Money on Tap. If that's you, give us a call at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. Whether you have 100,000, 500,000, 5 million. Look, folks, we have the right planner for you. Whether it's Ben or myself, Seth Krussman, we're here for you to get the plan together and make sure that that next step is right.
We appreciate you listening to Money on Tap with Ben, Seth, and Dan. You can contact us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. And now, more of this week's program.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. We are talking about let's lower your taxes. This is part one for us of a two-part show because guess what? There's a lot of stuff that we want to cover with you guys. And you know what? We want to have some fun while we're doing this too. So we appreciate you giving us the license to be here with you today. Hey, if you're new to Money on Tap, thank you for the subscriptions, the likes, the listens. We want to appreciate you. Send us an instant message or an email, and we've got something for you for being new to Money on Tap. We want to make sure that we get an opportunity to connect with you down the road. As financial planners, this is what we do with our clients. We've just gone through, a big part of our season, which is the tax season. And as financial planners, we need to what we do is we understand as much as we can, working with your CPAs, working with the teams to really bring the best solutions to the table for you. That's what we're about to be talking about here, is how to lower those taxes. And it's a lot of fun. So here we go.
Yeah, tax season is, as we mentioned earlier, it's over, and we're back in the conversation. I think one of the things that comes about is that no one calls their CPA until it's like April 1st most of the time, right? And that's when you see them, and they're the busiest, and you do the least amount of planning. You don't sit down with them. I would first off just encourage people, engage your CPA right now. Trust me, if they're probably on vacation for the next few weeks, and then when they come back in like June, next few months, sit down, give them a call, say, hey, listen, last year I felt like I paid too much, or how can I get a better refund, or what can I do to maximize my business planning? But here's some ideas to take to them. I think that's the first piece. Kind of the obvious one, and we talk about this right before the end of the year almost on a regular basis, but just walking into, just making a retirement account contribution and maximizing your retirement account contribution, seeing what maybe you're eligible for. This is something that, it might be an IRA, it might be a 401k or 403b at work, looking for every ounce of where that might be the right case for you.
Yeah, and just to take a quick step back, the timeliness of the show, taxes are fresh in our mind as we've just wrapped up the season. But I think this show, which applies to everybody, every individual taxpayer out there, and then next week's show, which is going to be kind of dedicated to the business owner, in a few different ways that we can show you that where anybody can qualify as such. But I think these are shows to download, save, and make sure you play them back in December. Give this thing another listen when it's a little bit more of urgency around getting the best you can out of your taxes. But there's the retirement account option, which Ben just mentioned too, because typically whatever you put in there is going to be deductible against your income right off the top and can put you in a better position towards paying. But there are deadlines involved by which you need to make those contributions, so be aware of that. But something else, and this plays into some of the Secure Act stuff, new options at work, right? Open up an HSA or check for flexible spending accounts at work. Contact your HR people and your benefits people and just make yourself fully aware of which things exist that can be deducted pre-tax straight from the paycheck and set aside for some future use, because the side benefit there is reducing your taxable income.
Yeah, and for people who haven't filed their taxes, if you're like me, yeah, I always push mine off to October anyways, but just so busy with all the tax season, you can still make your your retirement plan contribution all the way up until the time you file your taxes. A lot of people forget that. It's people race, I got to get it done before April 15th. Well, are you filing on April 15th? Because if you're not, then we don't have to race to do it. something to consider there is super important.
Yeah, a lot of people are getting the benefit of a 401k through their work. If you don't, if that's not an option for you, there may be an option for you to open one of those up on your own. Believe it or not, a solo 401k might be something that you need or want, as well as just your IRAs, your Roth IRAs, kind of those typical places where people go. Now, a lot of the time I find people are looking at tax season and saying, well, what do I owe? And looking at their checking account and saying, do I have that in the bank today to pay or not? And so maybe making those contributions towards those retirement accounts as the season progresses and you get towards that deadline of your taxes, maybe that's just not the solution for you. That might bring a lot of stress into the room. So what can you do if that's the case to start to kind of put that plan together? Maybe it's a monthly or a quarterly contribution for yourself. Those are conversations that you want to start to have and understand as you're planning for this next season as well. Dan, you did mention the HSA, which I think we all are huge fans of. It's what we call a triple threat in the tax world, meaning when you make a contribution to the HSA, that first part, okay, you get a deduction from your taxes. So you don't have to pay taxes on that money that you're contributing to the HSA. Second to that, it gets to grow tax-free. And after that, you can use the money from the HSA on your medical expenses, and it doesn't get taxed. So 1, 2, 3, triple threat way that you can maximize a strategy. And it doesn't have to be necessarily if you're, let's just say right now, you're kind of in that young space, kids going to the hospital, doing, stuff on a regular basis or lots of runny noses. Guess what? This can be a pass-through strategy for you. You can just make the contribution and use the money as you need it throughout the year. And boom, you have saved yourself some money on your taxes. And not just a little. You can save a lot on this strategy as well. So it's one of my favorites that we open the door to on a regular basis as we're talking to people. What are the qualifications? You have to have a high deductible medical plan. And so if you don't have that, then you're not going to qualify for this little strategy here. But just know that you might want to take a look at, well, do I need that high deductible medical plan? Or could I put some kind of a saving strategy in place that maybe I'm saving for that later date? Because you're going to have some medical expenses coming down the road, folks. If you haven't figured that out yet, that's just the way it is. Live healthy now. Keep doing what you're doing. Stay active and do your best. But as we get older, there are more medical expenses. And this is one of those ways that we can save.
Yeah, I think with the HSA, Seth, it's probably one of the things that I do religiously. I make my contribution every year, make a full one, and then I actually invest it in the market. There's a portion of it you have to keep out in our scenarios, but it's able to let it grow and kind of, become something bigger on its own. It's not just sitting in an account, dormant. Some people leave them at the bank and they get a little bit of interest, but, I really like the fact that it's tax-free growth, in that HSA, and it can come out tax-free, which is extremely unique. I would encourage people, go listen to our HSA show. It's a phenomenal show, and it's a lot of information there. But an HSA is a very, very powerful tool, super underutilized. It's kind of like Mighty Mouse. It's kind of how I would look at the HSA. It is something that's small, but it has a tremendous impact over time and so forth.
Yeah, and if not spent on health, you can move that into your retirement account too, and be treated just like an IRA at that point. So you wouldn't necessarily get the triple threat, but you get the first two legs of that, and those two kind of built-in tax benefits that it can really have a huge impact toward the retirement, especially over long periods of time.
Mm.
All right. So credit for higher education. So this is a tax credit to offset the cost of higher education. So there's it's called the American Opportunity Tax Credit. You can claim it for the first 4 years of college, and it provides a maximum credit of $2,500 per student per year. I don't know if you're in that situation where you have multiple students or you are a multiple student yourself. This is a credit that basically whatever you might owe the government, you get that credit. And if it exceeds the amount of taxes you owe, up to $1,000 could be refunded to you.
Yeah, student loan interest is still deductible there as well. So if you're in that situation, paying for education or paying for your children's education, take a good long look at that because to Seth's point, the reference up to $1,000 of it is refundable if that exceeds taxes due. So that could be money coming right back into your pocket.
If you're listening to Money on Tap, you can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. We're talking about let's lower your taxes today. And it is a great time for you if you are looking to put together a strategy for yourself to lower your taxes. Now's the time to do it, right? I mean, we're post the tax, that first tax cutoff for most people that pay their taxes at April 15th, 16th, 17th, whichever the day is of this year that we got to pay those taxes on. And most people are taking a break right now saying, I'm never going to think about taxes for, another 9 months or whatever. But if you want to be effective in this tax season, one of the things you can do is start working towards a goal now or start working towards your plan now. And that's some of the stuff that we're talking about right now.
Yeah, a lot of the things we're talking about, they might make small differences, but put all together and multiplied over a lifetime of efficiencies, create massive wealth. And I think that's one of the things. So, we talked about Mighty Mouse with the HSA. Like that's a pure equal scenario of that, opportunity. The 529 plan is becoming another Mighty Mouse. And I think, this is something that's pretty interesting. With the new Secure Act, and we talked about this in our other show, the Secure Act 2.0 does allow up to $35,000 of 529 plan money to be converted to the Roth of the beneficiary. Now, there was some confusion about who it is, but what people are looking at this as is like, well, you can change the beneficiary of a 529 plan. So after your son's done paying for college, change the beneficiary to yourself and maybe convert that to a Roth. There's so much unknown about this space. I would say that there's so much to come. Everything you Google has that caveat at the bottom of it, more information to come. This area has not been defined. Now, the 529 plan, the deduction here is for states that have, income tax. So this is an income tax deduction on the state level. Now, New Hampshire doesn't have an income tax. Oregon doesn't have an income tax. But for states that do, you need to make sure also you're using a state-sponsored plan and make sure that you're not, walking yourself into a trap of not using a state-sponsored plan that doesn't provide that for you. I think Massachusetts is American Funds, right?
That's right.
So, that's a pretty common, well-known one here. But in New Hampshire, it doesn't matter which plan we do, and therefore we can look at other options.
Yeah, we actually do have a deduction for the 529 because we have income tax in Oregon, Ben.
Oh,
I know that.
You guys don't have sales tax. I'm sorry. Yeah, I misspoke. Gotcha.
No, people forget about us all the time over here. We're not important.
It's
Don't
intentional.
worry about us.
It's intentional.
And another good one that's out there for potentially some of our listeners, something to keep an eye on, is the Earned Income Tax Credit. And what this says is that if you are a couple filing jointly, showing more or less than rather $64,000 of taxable income and have 3 or more kids, you may be eligible for up to a $7,500 tax credit, which is refundable. So that's money directly back into your pocket. So if you meet that criteria, absolutely be sure that's part of your tax filing.
And I think, some of these companies, I don't know, TurboTax, you go to H&R Block, and a lot of these people do have, or the people that you actually go see do have a lot of knowledge. They're trained. They go to, annual training pieces and so forth. But when you start going online and you start using these different software programs, some of these things are missed. Some of these things just aren't covered, and you don't even know what you aren't doing. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, in next week's show about the business side, because there's business pieces that a lot of business owners don't know, and they might be trying to still file their own taxes too, which can be a huge, huge loss to them. And I think, the earned income tax credit piece is something that can easily be lost if you're just, going longhand or you're doing a number of other things that you just aren't going to get. And it's money that would come back to you, as you mentioned, Dan, which I think is huge here. And this is why you get professionals involved and you really start working on this stuff.
Do you have property? And that property can be it can be a mutual fund, it can be an ETF, it can be a stock, it can be your house. If it's appreciated and you sell the property, then what you're going to be taxed on is whatever the growth is minus your basis. And so your basis is what you purchased the property at. And let's say you had a home for several years, or maybe not. Maybe in your case in New England, you've had it for 1 year and you've seen so much appreciation that now your basis has gone up. Or excuse me, not your basis, but the growth on the property has gone up so much that you might have a taxable event if you sell this property in the next year. As a single taxpayer, you're exempt up to $250,000. As joint, it's $500,000 in exemption. So one of the things you can do is take a look at the renovations or the improvements that you've done at a property, and that can help lower some of the taxability there. And if you're talking about assets like your stocks or anything that's been paying a dividend on it, that reinvestment of the dividend is something that needs to be paid attention in order to lower that cost basis and lower the taxability for you. You may also be one of these people out there that has had, well, a mutual fund, let's say, or any investment out there that's been paying a dividend for quite some time. If you've held on to this, there can be a lot of money on the table there that just has not been reported. And we see it a lot when people bring in the I love the garbage bag full of statements, and they've had, whatever stock they've had for, the last 30, 45 years. There's a ton of basis in there that if you don't get caught up on that, it's going to be probably a pretty significant taxable event.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I've had that happen a lot. I had one client who had been investing $25 or $50 a month. He started off at 10 in a mutual fund company. The mutual fund company was bought up by 3 other companies, and nobody had carried forward any of his basis. And he ended up having, in the two funds, he ended up buying 2 funds at one point, 2 different companies. They ended up merging, and it was so convoluted. There was nothing we could do, and it was north of $250,000. I mean, it was a large amount of money, and his basis in it was really low. And then there was another change. Oh, that was before the merger, and then it was like north of $400,000 or $500,000 when all of the mutual fund stuff came together under one company. And I had these 2 things, and I said to him, I said, "There's nothing we can do with this without you paying an astronomical amount of taxes. We have no idea what your basis is. It's essentially zero, other than you might have a few years worth of statements way back when." And he said, "Yeah." He's like, "Sell it when I pass away." And we did just that. And it was something he knew about it. He laughed. He's like, "I can't wait till you sell those mutual funds. I'll be watching you from heaven." It's like, 'cause it was really an irritant for him. It was kind of a funny story, but it's something that's really, really important.
And another one out there for our listeners out there who are in the military, serving our armed forces. There are special deductions that you may be eligible for, and things to take note of here, particularly if you travel more than 100 miles to report for duty. All the costs associated with travel, lodging, and meals would be deductible to you. And if you have a permanent change of station, so you're up and moving to a new base on a permanent basis, everything associated with that move for you is deductible.
You're listening to Money on Tap. We are talking about Let's Lower Your Taxes, part 1 of 2 shows here for us at Money on Tap. If you're listening via podcast, please subscribe. We appreciate you doing that. Send us a message at info@yourmoneyontap.com or give us a call at 855-226-8551 and tell us you're a new subscriber to Money on Tap. We've got something for you. We want to get it out the door to you as soon as possible and appreciate you for joining us at Money on Tap. We'll be right back.
Call us today at 855-226-8551 and get your free consultation with Ben Brayshaw or Seth Krussman or any one of our partners and find out what's going on in your plan, your estate plan, your financial plan, or what you're planning at all, if nothing. Get it fixed, get it right, get it done today. Give us a call at 855-226-8551.
You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. And now, more Money on Tap with Ben, Seth, and Dan.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. We're talking about Let's Lower Your Taxes, Part 1. And it's really interesting how much there is available to you. And like Ben said, if you start doing these things, these little parts and pieces add up to a lot.
Number 8 on our list today is making energy efficient updates. There's a number of different energy items out there. Specifically right now, which comes to the forefront, is the solar credit. Basically, 30% of what you spend on solar initiatives for your home is a credit against any taxes you owe, which is significantly different than a deduction. So if you end up spending, $50,000 on solar, I mean, you're going to get to deduct a third of that, essentially, right off your not deduct, but get a credit against whatever taxes you owe versus a deduction, and that can be pretty hefty depending on which tax bracket you're at and how that works. I mean, it can be almost equivalent if you're in a high enough tax bracket that it would be equal to what you actually spent on it as a deduction. I think that's one scenario. I think also building homes and energy efficient homes, there are some deductions there. I know some towns and local governments give you solar deductions for having solar on your home. I know that's another thing. There's lots of energy efficient pieces that are out there. I mean, even some of the light bulbs, you get the coupon at Home Depot, right, Dan? We were talking about that. Fill out 25 of those coupons and send them on in, and sometimes they'll send you money back too. Those are energy efficient updates seem to be the move to try to really stimulate the development of that space.
Yeah, no, I think it makes sense. And if you can lower your ongoing costs and derive some kind of a tax benefit out of it, then, even better. So well worth taking those steps. And this one's probably not for everybody out there, but for those of you who are regularly playing the lottery or perhaps scratching some tickets, those gambling losses can be deductible for you. So keep track of that. Actually, keep all the tickets, the scratch tickets, lottery tickets that you purchased that are not winners, and you can claim a deduction there for those as well.
Hopefully it's not drawers of those for people.
Yeah, this is not gambling, but if you are in a position where you've bought a stock or an equity and you had a loss on that, that is also something that you can go ahead and get. You can basically use it as a write-off against any of the gains that you've had in a portfolio, if you've had those gains in your portfolio. And you can actually carry those losses through or carry them forward for yourself as well in perpetuity. So pay attention to those as well.
Well, I don't know, Seth. I might have some disagreement on some stocks that are gambling. I mean, I would say that I
hate to put it into that context. Some people just think any of the investments other than gold or silver is gambling, right?
Yeah, I mean,
or real estate. Yeah.
I think it's all. It all can be gambling, but I think there's a perspective, right? So, I know we've chatted about it, just joking around, but there's a time when you're investing. And I think that hard attitude is one piece, and I think there's a time when you're gambling and your hard attitude is another piece. And I really think it has more to do with the hard attitude of what you're doing with your investments than it does actually what you're buying.
I like that a lot. That's a good acid test there for you.
Yeah, I'm guilty of both.
Yeah, don't forget your local tax breaks too. So depending on where you live, it's going to make a difference. There's state tax breaks that are different from the federal ones. Not everything lines up, right? Got to remember that. There's federal, there's state. And so we're looking at all of these. And depending on where you live, you might have some tax break as a small business owner. The more than 30 states may have available a tax liability via optional pass-through entity. It's just one of the ways that businesses can actually lower the taxes for business owners who opt into pass-through entity taxes. Another way that you might have some taxes out there that you might be able to opt out is if you're, say, in New York City, for example, there's a parking tax on rented spaces, but you can waive a portion of the fee by requesting an exemption. There is so many of these out there, depending on where you live, that it's really important to link up with the professionals and say, hey, where do we go from here?
I think knowing your state and local tax breaks are really, really important because we had this on a show, and I can't remember exactly the details, but New Hampshire's dividend tax is actually slowly going away and down to zero. And that's something that's a real opportunity for people who are in retirement and evaluating where you're going to live. We've done shows on, hey, what are the best states to retire in? And honestly, New Hampshire making that change, is a huge, huge opportunity for people to really look at that as a retirement piece. Though you may want to be in warmer Florida.
Well, as a financial planner, I think that's biblical. I really feel that is something that people need to consider.
Yeah. So it really is important to know your state taxes and what's going on, especially other states that you may be interested in living in. A lot of people, New Hampshire has just been a kind of a haven where people have just been flocking up here from Massachusetts and from Vermont. I was just talking to somebody, and that's why real estate is just so out of control here. But these state taxes, along with a number of different other pieces that are going on here, are really, really driving opportunity in New Hampshire.
I mean, when you think about the threat to Social Security and difficulties the markets have faced and the inflation we're fighting, if you can find an opportunity to save yourself 2%, 3%, 4% of your income, that's a big, big deal. It's not always the case, but I think in the circumstances right now, that's a significant savings and the kind of thing where having that local knowledge can really make all the difference.
Yeah, which brings us to number 11, which is our last item for the day, and I think it's going to probably take the most time. But, charitable donations or making a charitable donation. A lot of people say, well, I'm not in a position to give away my money. Or whatever. New Hampshire's probably one of the worst charitable financial states in the union, but it's actually one of the largest giving of time states in the union. So there's a lot of people who spend their time in charity and not their money. But sometimes you're already giving to a charity, and I know these numbers off the top of my head because I use them as an illustration in presentations. But if you're giving $1,000 a month away to say a church, so $12,000 a year, and let's say your itemized deductions come to $12,000, well, that's $24,000 of total deductions for you in a year. But this year's standardized deduction limit is $27,700, which is $3,700 more than your itemized deductions. Now, you get one or the other. You don't get a combination of the two. There's no mixture, and every year is evaluated singly. So this year you would receive $27,700 as your deductions. But if you do that same $12,000 of giving every year, what ends up happening is that you never get really credit for having given, because whether you gave or not, the $12,000 of other deductions you had, you still get the $27,700. But if you do give regularly, just summing those $12,000 of deductions up, say for the next 3 years, and just doing $36,000 in something as simple as a donor advised fund, which is basically giving to a charity, a charitable account that then distributes according to your will, which would give the same $1,000 a month over the next 3 years, but pushing those all to this year plus your $12,000 of itemized deductions brings you to $48,000, which is higher than the $27,000. So what ends up happening is in 1 year you wrap up a number that's much larger than the standardized numbers, and the next following years in which you don't have any write-offs for anything, you get the $27,000 for the following 2 years. That actually, if you do the math out and you're in a 24% tax bracket, you're talking about a $5,000 deduction or tax savings just by doing a donor advised fund. You didn't change how much you gave. All you did was you organized differently, and you actually saved $5,000 and put it in your pocket. Charitable donations, and if you could follow any of what I just said, can really drive up your tax savings and the amount of money you spend quite a bit. We do a lot of charitable trust work here. We build charitable trust work that create hundreds of thousands of dollars of deductions on your taxes for people who get private equity buyouts, who are selling a business or looking to sell a piece of real estate. Like creating tax incentive opportunities is what we focus on. One big item I see that a lot of people don't ever talk about is alternative minimum tax, and how charitable distributions can bring you within certain thresholds either to eliminate AMT entirely, which may save how much you're even giving sometimes, or when you hit $1,083,000, which is probably not every one of our listeners, right, of income, once you go above that, you lose all the automatic deductions that AMT comes with, all these kind of things that they include. After $1,083,000, they throw everything else out the window. Well, maybe you use charitable trusts and so forth to bring yourself under that threshold to Save yourself a substantial amount of money. There's just a lot you can do in the charitable space. But the next biggest item, and I'm going to pass this over to one of you guys, is avoiding the capital gains stock.
Yeah, avoiding capital gains tax on stock that you own, right? So the way to do that is rather than sell the stock yourself and realize that gain in the year in which you make the sale, you can actually donate the stock at its present value and receive the deduction on the total value. So if you have stock, and you mentioned that the mutual fund issue there with the capital gains and distribution tax that was just not able to really be accurately calculated, this is a potential savings for someone in that position. Or again, if it's just perhaps some stock that's just been in the family for a while, held for a while, and just really vastly appreciated, to the point where you just don't want to take that hit and sell it.
But even if you're going to donate to a charity one way or another, donating the appreciated stock versus the cash you've already paid taxes on is better to get rid of the stock than to give away cash that's already tax-free. I mean, you still got to cycle through. Equal dollar amounts, giving away the stock every time is the win.
Yeah, don't experience a tax event yourself.
Yeah.
The opposite of that, to make sure you do not donate stocks that are at a loss. That is something that you want to hold on to and go ahead and liquidate again to go ahead and use towards those capital gains, to offset the capital gains. And the final one here for us today is the donation of an RMD. Required minimum distributions are required, thus required minimum distribution, at age 73. Now, this is something that's that the government is going to say based off of how much you have in an IRA or a 401k. They're forcing you to take a portion of that. And the thing here is if you take that, it's going to come into your person as ordinary income. That's how it gets calculated. Well, if you donate that, now you can't. There's a couple of caveats here. You can't take receipt of the funds. You have to donate it directly from your IRA or 401k over to the charity. Well, that accomplishes your goal. They receive the funds, they receive the money, they receive the donation, and you don't have to take that in as ordinary income. It's a huge win-win here for people. And another thing is you don't have to donate all of your RMD, so it's not a, all in, but it's a part of a strategy, again, a part of a strategy that can make a big difference when we're moving the dial for you. All of these things.
Yeah, and I think, just kind of connecting the two dots here, the reason you would donate out of your IRA directly to a charity is because the majority of America never goes over the standardized deduction test. Like it's 90% or more. I think it's 93% of Americans never have to do the long form, essentially, or itemized, because they just never go over the 27,700. So when you take the RMD in personally, what ends up happening is that you don't really get the write-off because you already got the 27,700 given to you. So it makes no difference. So if you give directly out of your IRA, it never goes through your taxes and it never becomes income. So it's as if you're getting the deduction on top of the standardized deduction. And I think that's the piece that, it really comes down to, and I know we're wrapping up our show, but I think the final thoughts that come to me as we're talking through this is when you sit down with a financial planner and you're really working through all these little pieces and we start maximizing one thing after another, sitting down and going through it, the long-term magnification of all of this stuff turns into millions of dollars usually. Like you can't quantify it. You can't, either you did it or either you did or you didn't do it, right? And you're going to multiply that, compound it out over 20 years or 10 years or 40 or 50 years if you're listening and you're just getting started. These are the things that really drive long-term value and really help you get amplified in all sorts of ways between your portfolio, your financial. I mean, we've talked about mental and personal health, about how finances are. This is such a great opportunity when you sit down with someone like us or if you find somebody that you're really comfortable with to really get yourself in a better place.
Yeah, making these kind of donations to charity can't but help improve your mental outlook and make you just feel better about your person, about your finances, and about the world we're in, right?
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us today. You've listened to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. It has been a fantastic show with you guys today. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to meeting with you here in the near future. If I can get those words out, that will happen too. Be successful in your investing. We look forward to meeting up with you. Have a great week.
The views expressed are not necessarily the opinion of this radio station and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Investing is subject to risks, including loss of principal invested. No strategy, product, material, or tool mentioned can assure a profit nor protect against loss. Please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information, products, materials, or tools mentioned should be relied upon when coordinated with individual professional advice. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. This show may be subsidized in whole or in part by a product sponsor or issuer. Securities and advisory services offered through SagePoint Financial Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC, and a registered investment advisor. All other services offered through Brayshaw Financial Group LLC are independent of SagePoint Financial. SagePoint Financial and Brayshaw Financial Group do not provide tax or legal advice. Main office is located at 116 South River Road, Bedford, New Hampshire, 03110, and can be reached at toll-free 855-226-8551.
Well, bye.